Let's jump straight into the source material for Sinbad's catastrophic third voyage. When we hear the name Sinbad, we usually picture grand, swashbuckling adventures, right? Treasure chests, daring sword fights. Well, throw that out the window. This specific voyage is entirely different. It is a pure, psychological survival thriller. After getting bored of a comfortable life in Baghdad, Sinbad sets out again, only to plunge into a nightmare that tests the absolute limits of the human mind. We're going to track not just his physical escape, but his intense emotional roller coaster, from total, suffocating despair to an unyielding will to survive.
Picture standing in front of a threat described exactly like this. His 4 teeth were very long and sharp, his upper lip hung down upon his breast, his ears resembled those of an elephant. Sounds like something pulled straight out of a fever dream, doesn't it? As we break down these events, we're going to see exactly how Sinbad survives this literal monster. But honestly, what's even more fascinating is watching him battle his own internal demons, finding the sheer strength to keep going when hope seems entirely gone.
Which brings us to the first leg of this nightmare, marooned by savages.
Driven way off course by a brutal storm, the crew is suddenly swarmed by an innumerable multitude of terrifying, 2-foot-tall, hairy savages who just flat out steal their ship. Now they're stranded. Wandering inland to forage for food, they stumble upon this lofty, elegant palace with massive, double-leaved ebony gates. They force them open, expecting shelter, but are immediately seized with dread. The courtyard isn't a sanctuary at all. It's a slaughterhouse. On one side, there's a massive heap of human bones, and on the other, a vast array of roasting spits. Exhausted and terrified, the men literally collapse to the ground, lying motionless for hours in pure panic.
Then the bottom completely falls out. At sunset, the gates crash open. In walks this monstrous cannibal, tall as a palm tree. He's got a single eye glowing red as a burning coal right in the middle of his forehead, and nails like the talons of massive birds. He literally picks the terrified men up by the napes of their necks, examining them the way a butcher examines meat. Deciding Sinbad is too lean, he grabs the fattest man in the group, their captain, thrusts a massive spit right through him, and casually roasts him over a great fire for his supper.
Tracking the events over the next few days, the horror just escalates. The monster falls asleep, snoring louder than thunder, leaving the surviving man paralyzed in the dark. On day 1, they're in way too much shock to even think about fighting back. By day 2, they try to flee and hide on the island, but finding zero shelter, they're forced right back to the Nightmare Palace. There, they have to watch a second comrade get roasted and eaten. They are completely trapped in this cycle of suffocating dread, which perfectly sets up the explosive events of day 3.
It's right here that we witness a profound psychological shift. The crew is at a total breaking point. Several men actually argue it would be better to throw themselves into the sea and drown rather than face being roasted alive. But Sinbad steps up. Instead of yielding to that despair, he channels what the text beautifully calls his natural love of life into direct action. He argues that it makes way more sense to use whatever energy they have left to rid themselves of the monster. He literally talks them down from the ledge and focuses all that panic into sharp, calculated resolve.
And that resolve turns into a meticulous, desperate survival plan. Sinbad knows they obviously can't kill a giant in hand-to-hand combat. So during the day, they sneak to the coast and build wooden rafts, each capable of carrying 3 men. The plan is brutally simple but terrifyingly risky. Wait for the giant to eat another friend and fall asleep, heat the very spits he uses for roasting in the fire until they're red hot, blind him, and then run like hell to the rafts.
When the time comes, exactly 9 of the boldest men join Sinbad to execute the plan. You really have to imagine the sheer nerve this took. Having just watched another friend devoured, they wait for that thunderous snoring to start. 10 men total lift the red-hot iron spits. In perfect unison, they thrust them deep into the giant's glowing red eye. The monster wakes in unimaginable agony, giving a frightful yell and stretching out his talon-like hands to grab them. But the men instantly scatter. The blinded giant eventually gropes his way out of the courtyard, howling into the night. But just as they think they've actually pulled it off, the emotional whiplash hits hard. They wait at the rafts until dawn, praying the giant bled out. Instead, he comes back, being led by 2 other giants of the exact same massive size, with an entire horde following them. Sinbad and his crew frantically push the rafts into the sea, but the cannibals run right into the water, up to their waists, and accurately hurl massive boulders at the escaping men. They violently smash and sink almost every single raft. In an instant, practically the entire crew drowns.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire, we reach our second major threat, the Serpent's Island.
Rowing furiously out of range, Sinbad and his two remaining companions eventually wash up on a beautiful new island. They think they've found salvation, but that relief is incredibly short-lived. As they're sleeping on the beach, they're woken up by the rustling scales of a massive snake. It seizes one of the men. The source text describes the moment mercilessly. Dashing him several times against the ground, it crushed him, and we could hear it gnaw and tear the poor wretch's bones. Even as Sinbad and the last survivor flee into the darkness, the sickening sound of their friend being eaten echoes right behind them.
This is where Sinbad reaches the absolute bottom of the abyss. The next night, desperate to stay safe, Sinbad and his last remaining friend climb a massive tree to sleep, but the serpent comes right back. It simply rears up the trunk, effortlessly plucks the companion who is sitting a bit lower down, swallows him whole, and slithers away. Left completely alone, Sinbad climbs down the next morning feeling, quote, more like a dead man than one alive. The dictative despair hits him so hard that he actually walks out toward the sea, fully intending to drown himself. But once again, at the very last second, that natural love of life kicks in. He wrestles back control from his own hopelessness. Refusing to die without a fight, he spends the entire day frantically gathering immense quantities of small wood, brambles, and dry thorns. He builds a wide, impenetrable circle around the base of the tree, tying thick branches directly over his head to form a roof. As evening rolls in, he locks himself inside this makeshift thorny bunker.
Imagine enduring a long, terrifying night locked inside that tiny circle. The serpent arrives right on schedule and circles the rampart relentlessly. The text beautifully compares it to a cat watching in vain for a mouse that has reached safety. Sinbad is trapped in this thorny cage for hours, unable to move, suffocating on the toxic, nauseating breath of the giant snake mere inches away, just desperately praying for dawn to break and force the beast to retreat.
Finally, we hit the climax of the journey: rescue and reward. Pushed to the very brink of exhaustion, with his resilience absolutely shattered, Sinbad once again runs toward the ocean, but fortune flips the script entirely. In an unbelievable twist of fate, he manages to flag down a passing ship using the linen of his turban, and once aboard, he realizes the captain is the exact same man who accidentally abandoned him on his second voyage. The captain casually mentions he still has some goods belonging to a dead merchant named Sinbad, whom he'd left behind years ago. Sinbad looks right at him and says, "Look at me, I am Sinbad." The captain is stunned, but after looking closely, recognizes the man in rags standing right in front of him. It's a staggering moment of closure.
The captain generously hands back his old cargo. With his identity and wealth suddenly restored, Sinbad immediately gets back to business, trading for sandalwood, cloves, and cinnamon along the route home. The sheer terror of the islands fades into wonder as he witnesses marvelous sights: a giant tortoise over 30 feet long and strange amphibious creatures that look like cows and camels. He returns to Baghdad unfathomably wealthy, and the very first thing he does, he gives a huge portion of his newfound riches to the poor, deeply changed by what he just survived.
So, to wrap up our look at this text, think about the ultimate question it leaves us with. What is the true limit of human resilience when facing impossible odds? If you were trapped between cannibal giants and a monstrous serpent, would your natural love of life conquer your despair? Sinbad's third voyage isn't just an old fantasy tale. It's a brutal masterclass in psychological endurance. It proves that even when we are brought to our absolute lowest point, the sheer human will to survive might just be the greatest weapon we have. Thanks for jumping into this intense journey with me, and keep digging into the stories that challenge what we know about ourselves.